The hall was silent as Ambassador Kirath stepped up to the podium. Hundreds of dignitaries from dozens of worlds were gathered for this historic summit to discuss the growing conflict between the Vorlian Federation and the Girath Commonwealth. If diplomacy failed, it could plunge the entire sector into an interstellar war that would devastate countless inhabited systems. Kirath cleared his throat and began speaking in a calming baritone. Esteemed colleagues, we are here today to hammer out a peaceful resolution to the rising tensions over control of the Dryas Nebula. As we all know, this resource-rich region is claimed by both the Vorlians and the Girath due to a centuries-old territorial dispute. As the ambassador continued droning on about the nuances of the conflict's history, a lone human sat in a rear corner of the assembly chamber, taking diligent notes. Rebecca Williams was one of Earth's top diplomatic attaches and a renowned scholar of galactic affairs. Though humanity was a relatively new member of interstellar society, their extensive experience with warfare and peacemaking had made them indispensable assets on the galactic stage. After 20 minutes, Kirath reached the crux of his opening remarks. Given the high stakes involved, I have requested the attendance of a human diplomat to help mediate these proceedings. They were selected for their species' unique qualifications resolving complex, protracted conflicts. With a subtle nod, Rebecca stood and made her way to the podium, handing Kirath a datapad with her notes. The Sivran ambassador looked over them briefly before resuming. Thank you, Madam Williams. As your insight has already revealed, this is not a simple disagreement, but a tangled web of grievances dating back over 5 centuries to the formation of the two powers. Deep-seated hatreds and prejudices have become enshrined in cultural narratives on both sides. Rebecca stepped up to the podium and activated a holoprojector, displaying a complex map illustrating the overlapping claims and spheres of influence. My esteemed colleagues, we cannot allow these ancient ethno-cultural enmities to cloud our judgment. We must look at this situation not from the lens of historic grievances, but through the pragmatic lens of realpolitik. Clearing her throat, the human diplomat continued. For those of you unfamiliar with human history, we come from a world where conflict has been the driving force of civilization for millennia. Countless wars have been fought over land, resources, religion, ethnicity, and every conceivable point of contention. Out of this crucible of perpetual violence, my species developed an ingrained tendency towards pragmatism and realpolitik out of sheer necessity for survival. She gestured to the star maps highlighting the contentious star systems and resource-rich regions under dispute. When we look at this objectively, the core issue is one of access and control of resources, full stop. All the ethnic, religious, and historical window dressing is just that window dressing designed to weaponize cultural grievances as a pretext for conflict. If we strip that away, what we're left with is a coldly rational debate over the allocation of assets between two interstellar powers. Murmurs rippled through the assembly chamber as the other delegates considered her analysis. Rebecca let them process her reframing for a moment before plowing ahead. Now, some would argue that such an amoral, materialistic view is cynical and dehumanizing. But as my people's history has demonstrated time and again, burying our heads in the sands of ethical abstraction simply leads to more bloodshed, more failed diplomacy, and repeating the same cycles of violence indefinitely. We must confront this issue with the same cutthroat pragmatism that has allowed our species to survive. She zoomed in on the hologram, highlighting 2 systems in particular. In my analysis, these are the crux systems that will determine the balance of power and control of resources in this conflict. Control over these systems would effectively grant de facto economic and strategic hegemony over the entire Dryas Nebula. So I propose we start our negotiations there. Let's cut through the self-righteous narratives justifying conquest through moral outrage and get down to brass tacks. Once we've neutralized those strategic assets, we can focus on de-escalating tensions and verifying any peace through robust demilitarization and impartial third-party oversight. For the next several hours, the human diplomat masterfully navigated the tumultuous negotiations, stripping away centuries of grievance to reveal the stark calculus of power and national interest at the conflict's core. Using humanity's unique grasp of realpolitik, she slowly brokered a compromise that avoided a ruinous interstellar war while preserving both sides' core strategic interests. As the summit concluded, Kirath approached Rebecca with a weary smile. I must congratulate you, Madam Williams. Your reframing of this dispute as an amoral struggle over resources rather than a zero-sum conflict of ideologies broke the stalemate wide open. She nodded solemnly. For too long, galactic politics has been haunted by the ghosts of old grievances and bloodshed. As a student of history, I've seen how such irrational foundations inevitably lead to cyclical violence and ruin. Sentient beings may never fully escape their tribal instincts, but humanity's role is to apply realpolitik and pragmatism to smother those baser impulses. Hopefully, with enough time and mediating influence, we can drag the rest of the galaxy into an existence of pure realpolitik. Rebecca continued, where borders and boundaries are determined solely by economic and security interests rather than ancient hatreds and superstitions. Cold, yes, but infinitely more stable and peaceful than the alternative of perpetual ideological warfare. Kirath looked distinctly uneasy at her vision of a purely materialistic galaxy stripped of higher ideals. Peace through pure self-interest? That's a chillingly ruthlessly philosophy, if effective in this case. Ruthless, but necessary for a galaxy constantly teetering on the brink, she stated flatly. You may find our methods cold and uncomfortable, but does anyone truly believe the old ways of ideological zealotry and settling grievances through bloodshed are better? Realpolitik is the immunization that will eventually cure the body galactic of its violent episodes of fever, even if the process is uncomfortable. The ambassador nodded slowly in grudging agreement. For good or ill, if there are any diplomats capable of dragging the rest of us toward that amoral endgame, it is your people. I simply pray that once you've fully drained the passion from the galaxy's warring ideologies, you'll still have enough humanity left to remember why we aspired to higher ideals to begin with. Rebecca gave a thin smile as she headed back to prepare her next assignment. Whether the rest of the galaxy appreciated it or not, humanity's role was to impose the cold calculus of realpolitik on a cosmos still consumed by irrationality and conflict. It was the bitter medicine the galaxy needed to survive its own worst impulses.